Hi there. Thanks for coming along to our breakfast event to showcase some of our micro-learning speakers around project and program management. We're not quite ready yet. We're still sorting things out, getting the technology up and running so we can all be ready for you. So in the meantime, have a look at a few of these snippets and it'll give you a bit of a taster as to some of the other micro-learning modules that we've got, some of the speakers we've got coming up in store over the next 12 months. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Projects in the OGC world, in MSP and Prince world, exist to deliver outputs. And what do we mean by it? PMI calls them deliverables. It's a thing. Usually it means you can have your photograph taken next to it. You know, you can, if you can tap it, it's an output.
Risks and issues on programs.
So when you've got a whole load of things on your risk register, have a look through them and go, what are the causes that we have? What are the big answers to lots of these things? But it's useful to say, am I looking at an effect or a cause when you're looking at the risk register?
Oh, hi. Thanks for coming back. We're still getting the cameras ready. We're still getting everyone positioned so we can do the broadcast really well for you. So look, have a look at a few more of these micro-learning snippets. So you get a bit of a taster of what's in store. Again, talk to you soon. Thanks for hanging by. Cheers.
What are the benefits of vaccinating children against flu? Well, presumably it means the kids don't get flu. They can go to school, their exam scores improve, their education improves. They don't give flu to other kids at school. That's good. That's a benefit. It's a measurable improvement. We can measure the amount of days that kids have off school because they do measure it. We can do this stuff.
A team member may say something like, this new project is negatively affecting our team, and that's not being taken into consideration at all. So an active listener could respond by reflecting back. What I'm hearing you say is this new project will have negative consequences for your team. So I'm not parroting back, I'm reflecting back what I'm hearing in my own words.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much again for joining us. Now, we're just showing you a few of these snippets, so you've got a bit of a taster of what the micro-learning is all about. We've got a couple of presenters coming up shortly to speak to you. It's all sort of around the micro-learning for project and program managers. So we're still getting the lights all sorted and getting the microphones on and things like that. So just bear with us for a few more moments and you should be good to go, okay? So we'll definitely be seeing you soon. Cheers.
Project, Program and Portfolio Management Maturity Model, P3M3 Maturity Levels.
So at level 1 maturity, which we call awareness, so there's kind of a process awareness, they are kind of the fun places to work, right? Because every project's exciting for them because they've got no idea what's going to happen.
Establishing an enterprise project management office.
One of the key things is spending a lot of time on problem definition. understanding, and obviously the same for projects, right? What are we actually trying to resolve here? Are we all clear? Are we all agreed? It takes a lot of time to do that.
I don't know. Is this the right table? I can't work it out. Look, we're going to be just taking a little bit longer to get this ready. We've got a few cables here that we're not quite sure where they're meant to go. But once we've got those in, we'll be up and running. So look, keep enjoying yourself watching these micro learning snippets. They'll no doubt give you a bit of knowledge around project and program management. So yeah, talk to you soon. Cheers.
Ponder this. We typically divide projects into work packages. We divide programs into projects. There's inevitably an overlap. Should I run a big, complicated project with big, complicated work packages? Or should I run a simple program with specific projects in it? One person's big, complicated work package is another person's simple project. And organizations will make different choices.
Multiple diverse infections.
When they scan your temperature, if it was above 37 or something, you were a potentially Ebola carrier. Now, the problem is in a country like Sierra Leone, your humidity is hot. We're right in the midst of malaria season. And then you've got huge HIV cases going on as well.
Hello everybody, welcome to our broadcast from the UK. Sitting here with Andy Murray himself. Very excited to be just outside Liverpool. Give us the exact location.
West Kirby on the Wirral. It's a little bit between Liverpool and North Wales.
That's right. And I've already seen, we've actually still got light here. I don't know if you guys have got the sun yet down in Auckland, but we've actually still got a bit of light here. That sun is going to be arriving with you very shortly. Okay, so look, kia ora everybody, kia ora and welcome to the CC Learning breakfast event. Morena whānau in Auckland, we're excited to have you joining us. I'm broadcasting, like we've said, from West Kirby Wirral, just outside Liverpool, on a beautiful evening. It's quite nice. We've gone and had some beautiful dinner here at Andy's house, very nice. We've got dozens of people from around the world online via YouTube and LinkedIn. We've got Andy joining Patrick Dohi in Wellington, and Andy and I in the UK. So thanks for getting up nice and early this event, and thank you for joining us this evening on Tuesday. So we're obviously in the past compared to New Zealand. I'd like to do a call out to those joining us from New Zealand and beyond. So I've got in Hamilton City Council, we've got Anne-Marie, Karen and Lisa. In Datacom, we've got Rachel, Morna and Connie. At the Tiara Lakes Trust, great to have you guys here again. Rawinia, Hene, Alex, Simone, Harata, Soeta, Keely, Melissa, Storm, Tararopo, Amy, Corey, Kahurangi, Kim, Maharara, Hiamoa, Jake, Neil, Tui, Mary, Tony and Sarah. Thanks you guys for coming along. Great to have you here. And of course from the Whakaronga Aotearoa, we've got Tiria. From DBA, we've got Carl. From the Open Polytechnic down in Wellington, we've got Lynn, Frank, or Lorena. Great to see you guys here. And WSP, we've got Sian, University of Otago, Dylan, Pippian, Bailey, and Timothy. Thanks, guys, for all the way down there in Dunedin. Auckland Council, we've got Malcolm, Rob, Peter, and Maria. Taranaki Regional Council, we've got Joe. Thanks for joining us, Joe. Ascensia Limited, we've got Stephen. Ministry of Education in Wellington, we've got Michael and Henriette. And ACC, which is Accident Compensation Corporation, we've got Frank. And Aurora Energy, way down in Otago, down there in Dunedin, we've got Megan. And Ekapanuku, we have Jamie, Medina, Thanks for joining us, guys. And Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand, Counties Manukau. We've got Marizelle and Alan. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Jeff in Treasury. I know Jeff's going to be watching a recording of this, which we'll be sending after the event. So as far as you go, Jeff, seeing the recording, good to see you here. NZ Post, we've got Catherine. And from the Department of Internal Affairs, DIA, we've got Frederick. And more from Te Whatu Ora, Health New Zealand, Waitemata DHB, Michael, and Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand, Auckland DHB, Vishal. So good to see you guys here too. We've got Grant from Influence New Zealand. Good to see you joining, Grant. Mandy, Lacey Consulting. We've got Mandy, of course. Christchurch City Council, we've got Louise. NZ Transport Agency, we've got James. MPI, Zen and David. MBIE, which is Nicole's joining us from there. And of course, the Minister of Defence, Teresa, Rick, Brett, Hazel, and Philip. And of course, 360 Testing Limited, Thomas. Thanks for joining us, guys. So look, please ask questions via YouTube or the LinkedIn chat. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn channel to get future notifications. And to ask a question or to post on YouTube, you need to have subscribed. So do that, and we'll be online helping you in the chat if you need any assistance. And we want you to continue the conversation and post messages both online and at your workplace. It'll help us if you share this event to promote it for the next time. Okay, so I've got Andy here. Andy's going to discuss major projects. He's the Executive Director of the Major Projects Association. He's going to give us a talk about the challenges of initiating and delivering projects at scale. So he's going to explain what constitutes a major project and how that introduces complexities and the various approaches to tackle them. So be ready to hear about this wicked mess, I think you've called it, haven't you,
Yep.
of major projects and to how to avoid the complexity cliff. So let's see if I can get the technology working, and I'm going to change over to Andy now. And like I say, please put a few comments in. We'd really appreciate it if you could make a few comments and let us know whether you can hear us, because we're hoping that the audio is working well, but also making sure that you can see us, and if you have got any questions, please feel free to ask them. So I'll transition to Andy. Fingers crossed here, Andy. Cross your fingers. Here we go.
Thank you, Scott. That's probably the low-tech transition you've ever done on one of these sessions when we're sat next to each other. So welcome, everyone. Kia ora, Auckland, live from Liverpool here. And Scott asked me to, I was going to give you 4 key points that characterise a major project, and in turn, those things that make them complex and challenging, and some tips, if you like, about what we can do about them. But Scott said I needed to do 5. So you're going to get a bonus one this morning as well. So what I'd like to do is just to run through each of those in turn. So one of the things that characterises a major project, or at the top level, if you like, is one that's it's generally nationally significant or regionally significant, but it will mostly be about the scale of its impact and the change it's going to have on citizens or an organisation. But one of the things that characterises a major project is that they are typically, but not always, but they are typically over a long duration. The scale of them requires them to take time in order for them to be delivered. And one of the challenges that we have with major projects or programs that take time is that time in itself causes us issues. So in the UK, for example, we have metro mayors, and they will be elected on a 4-year cycle that do not always coincide with the national elections. So already you can see if you've got a project that lasts, say, 3 or 4 years, the likelihood is that the political leadership of the national and city regions are likely to change during that period. And the significance of that is that there could be election manifestos that even the existing mayor or political leaders will come up with, and that will often introduce changes of priorities, and therefore you need to understand how your project, even if it's already underway, will align to new or emerging priorities as they come along. So that's just one characteristic, that sort of political dynamic that happens for projects that operate over a long duration. And one of the other characteristics is that the people involved in the project itself are therefore likely to change. And certainly major projects where they might say take a decade or more. So in the UK we have High Speed 2, a high-speed railway from London to Birmingham and then hopefully on to Manchester and further. That's taking 15 or 20 years from the first idea through to getting the power and consents, through the construction phase and transition into operational. So some people will spend a big proportion of their career potentially working on one project. So they need to have development pathways, progression, and people will change. There'll be churn on these projects beyond what there would be on a shorter term project. And then the other aspects around sort of the socioeconomics and technology changes. So if we spend too much time planning and understanding what we're going to do in multiple years' time today, and things change, then we may well have wasted time or also not exploited the opportunities that are going to come to us as those new things emerge. So one of the things that we can do, and I would like to hear your suggestions and also perhaps some questions on this, is what can we do when we're setting up projects and we have this human nature to want to plan things to a reasonable degree of detail for environments that are going to change. Interestingly, the National Infrastructure Commission in the UK has also been looking at this because they're tasked with providing a long-term view of the infrastructure needs of the country. So how do they recommend going about setting out our projects that need to be more responsive and more adaptive as they progress? And one of the things I have seen are projects that are thinking about the potential that some of the assets or the products or the outputs that they create may well need to be repurposed later on. So they're not being designed for just a single purpose, but they're sort of delivering platforms, if you like, that could be used for multiple purposes as the needs might change over time. So that's one. The second one is the number of organisations involved in major projects. So one of the characteristics of a more simple project would be perhaps even just a single organisation. It might include multiple departments or parts of that organisation involved. It may involve a supplier or a number of suppliers, but there's a single controlling mind, if you like, that's overseeing them. When you get into projects at scale, some of the concepts that we have in terms of accountability and responsibility and regular project management doesn't really scale up very well. We get into this concept of co-ownership, where there's more than one owner. If you've got more than one owner, you've got more than one business case. So again, we're breaking rules all of a sudden. You can't have more than one business case, but in practice you do. So we've got this multiple organisations. We're likely to have multiple cultures, multiple ways of working, multiple standards, multiple business reasons for undertaking the project. So how do we map out the alignment, if there is such a thing as alignment, of all those parties involved? And again, one of the things that we can do here is just to try and understand what those what the organisations are that are involved and even anticipate future ones. So if you're creating a new organisation like a railway system, for example, the operator doesn't exist yet. So how can you anticipate what the culture is likely to be in an organisation that's yet to be formed? So we might have to anticipate some of these, and we can plan and model what that might be for the project as it progresses. But certainly we need to keep a watching brief on these organisations so that we can understand when they're likely to change or get those sort of tipping points where we can see there's emerging patterns being created. One of the other characteristics when there's multiple organisations, it's not just your relationship as perhaps the project entity to these organisations or the organisations involved, but it's their relationships with each other. And we often don't see that sort of analysis, that dynamic of multiple organisations and multiple types of relationships between them. So just think about that, perhaps pop in some questions related to that as well. The third tip, or the third characteristic of a major project, in my non-technical terms, is the number of parts. How big is it in terms of the amount of stuff that needs to be delivered for the project to work? And there's some challenges when we've got multiple parts and lots of them. One is the interconnectedness of them, so how integrated do they need to be? Another one is the relative maturity of them, so are they all at the same level of maturity, or are some parts new and novel or first of a kind? And how do we make sure that even if we sort of unpick them and understand each one individually, that when we bring them back together as a whole, whether they actually work as a whole? And so there's some things that we can do here around systems integration. We can apply that systems thinking early to understand what the relationships are between the parts, and then we understand the interconnectedness and where the risks of those interfaces might exist. But here's a trap. We often will think about the number of parts and the systems complexity on a technical basis, but to deliver outcomes and the benefits we want, there's often social systems that need to be created or modified or delivered. And so understanding the interconnectedness of the social systems and the social systems with the technical systems is something we mustn't overlook as well. So the fourth aspect is around the modelling that will justify the major project. And so we're talking about something that's quite complex, lots of organisations involved, both in the delivery and then in the use of whatever comes from the major project. As we can just see, we've got the interconnectedness of all the parts and the system, and the systems are systems that it might operate within. So how do we go about producing a justification when a lot of our best practice suggests that we should be boiling that down to a cost benefit ratio? That's going to encourage us to try and monetize every type of benefit and to demonstrate causal relationships between things that the project's delivering and the benefits that are gained. And these are challenging, and by the time we've modelled it and understood it, it's likely to be wrong. So there's a real challenge around the underpinning models that we might use for major projects. And sometimes for projects that are first of a kind or are changing the way we're doing things, the existing models that we will use just don't work. So one example of this is in the need to sort of move towards sustainability and low carbon economies. The use of tidal lagoons for tidal power is great, but we've yet to find a way that they can give a payback in 20 years that many of the sort of treasuries and governments out there will look for a payback period. It might be 50 years, but 50 years in an asset that will last you 150 years is actually a good deal. So why can't we change the economic model upon which we evaluate some of our major projects? And that gets onto a pet peeve of mine as well, and I'm a bit heretic on this one, is that we often use something called discounted cash flow, and it's great from just a normal understanding of things, but what that really means, if you unpick it logically, is that the value of a benefit tomorrow is worth less than the value of a benefit today. Now, if we change the benefit from a monetary one to say it's a life, the value of a life tomorrow is worth less than a life today. You can see already we've got a model that's encouraging us to have short-term thinking. So how can we break some of these models? And my personal view, and I would argue, is that we should really look carefully about the use of discounted cash flow, particularly when we've only got one planet and finite resources, because discounted cash flow also gets to the point where it's really assuming there's an infinite amount of resources and time that we can work to. So the fifth one, the bonus that Scott asked me to talk about, and I know I'm sort of over time now, which is why I'm going to give you a teaser that I'll be talking about this one tomorrow, which is there's no real playbook for this. And a part of that is because the temporary organisations or the temporary nature of projects means that we're not very good at collecting data. We're not very good because of the multiple organisations and the silo nature of where that data might exist, of really understanding what's truly going on in projects in order to make them better. And particularly when projects finish, where's all that data gone? You know, if I want to find out how another project in another part of the world, and I want to perhaps get the schedule data, the cost data, the behavioural data of how the teams really operated together, where can I get it? Now, if I was a manufacturing organisation or a retail organisation or a logistics organisation, I would have that. And I'll be optimising my management methods based upon the data I've got. We're not there yet in projects. So data is my pet peeve on the fifth one. And we'll be having a chat about what we can do to get hold of data, to use things like data trust, to truly understand what's really going on in projects, so we stop winging it and start basing project management on evidence. And now I'll leave it there. Are we doing a low-tech transition again now, Scott?
You see magical transitions. How's that? Suddenly we're available in the two of us rather than just being one of us. I am interested to. Wait, I think Patrick's not going to be able to join us this morning, so we're going to stretch this out.
Okay, well,
Okay,
I could do 6 points then.
That's right, exactly. You could do, and that would be. And what's the value of that now compared to later? I wonder. I'm not sure. So I'm sure one of the things that a lot of people in New Zealand are thinking is that wait, we've got projects, we've got programs. If something's big, you just make it a program. Isn't that the way? I mean, isn't that the easiest thing? I mean, why can't we just do that?
Okay. So when I talk about major projects and the Major Projects Association, we use, and similar to the Association for Project Management does as well, we use the term project to mean
I see.
projects, programs, and portfolios. So
great.
So in that respect, we're really talking about a scheme, if you want to think of it that way. So the scheme being a new railway system, or a new nuclear power station, or a flood defence system, or a tidal lagoon. Whether you use a portfolio-based approach, a program approach, or a project approach is critically important. But I'm wrapping the P3M into one there.
Right. Okay. Great. All right. That's good. And so, with regards to things like large projects, like you were discussing, and the sort of challenges that you're faced, it sounds to me like some of these projects are almost like organisations in themselves. Like, could you argue that this is actually a company? Like a company, there to deliver a particular, like maybe not a business case, but a business plan. Are these things maybe they probably have human resources? They probably have they're probably very close to actually what a normal company might look like. Maybe it's not looking at profitability, but something like that. Does that have an influence?
It does. So if you take some of the big infrastructure projects in the UK, like Tideway, which is replacing the Victorian sewers along the River Thames in London. It's a few billion sterling in total. If that was a listed company, it would be in the FTSE 250.
Yeah.
So in terms of the scale of that project work, in terms of the amount of expenditure, the monthly spend, and the headcount that's generated. So you're right. Some of these major projects, when they go through that early stages of forming, do look like startups. So you've got a core kernel of people thinking about policy and design, and basically going to get the money, like a startup does. And then they secure the funding, and then you start recruiting everyone, and then the culture changes as well. So there's an academic called Greiner that sort of has modelled organisational states as organisations grow from being an SME to a larger organisation to a corporate and so on. They go through these transition points, and they're really quite painful, and also they're inevitable as well. So, and projects do the same when they're scaling up for a major project. They go through these transitions of being a small team, quite agile and nimble, to being all of a sudden we're recruiting lots of people, and you're worried about what the processes are and what the where the office is going to be located, all those sorts of things. And then you'll go through another transition as some of the early people roll off, and you've got more delivery people coming on board. There's one project in the UK, the Geological Disposal Facility for the UK's high hazard nuclear waste. So if you want to talk, this is the most extreme one I've come across in terms of, I think the build phase for that one is potentially something like 140 years.
Wow. Okay.
And the lifetime of the asset is tens of thousands of years.
So you won't have the same project manager by the end of it, I'm guessing.
No, but the early stages of that project was R&D. So it's about the feasibility of how you're going to go about it, the different geologies that would provide that barrier, and how deep, and there's all sorts of other. But it's effectively it's a research organisation. Then it gets to the point where it's looking to put the business case together to go and get funding from the government for it. It needs to find a site. Now all of a sudden you're looking like a developer.
Right. Yes.
And you're securing the site, and then when you've secured the sites and got the consent of the local communities, then you're looking like a construction organisation. So they're very different organisations, and they will go through those transitions. And that I've picked an example there that that's at an extreme end of the scale, but that happens on smaller major projects if there's such a thing.
So how do you keep the politics going? Like I know Patrick was going to be talking to us about the ATO digital transformation project, and when I spoke to him about it, one of the things he said is that they put a lot of effort into talking to both sides of the house because they were getting government funding, and making sure that they said, look, if we start this, we've got to finish it. If we go halfway, it's going to be a disaster because we'll half digitize things and it won't be there available for everyone. The biggest bang for your buck is actually completing the projects. You've got to all be committed to do it because it's going to span governments.
Yeah.
And for those sort of projects, they're definitely spanning governments.
They
so
are.
They must be highly politicised.
So they are, and one of the things that I mentioned, the National Infrastructure Commission earlier, that was set up to provide that longer term view and also to make the decision making on nationally significant infrastructure less partisan. So it gets cross party support. There might be an all party parliamentary group that would support that as well. So there are mechanisms to address some of that political aspect, but it will still come to a crunch. I mean, High Speed 2 has had different perspectives about whether it will go the whole way or not, and the aspect around the business case, being for London to Birmingham, it makes sense, but going all the way to Manchester and Liverpool and beyond makes even more sense when you treat it as an overall investment. But if you don't do the second part, the phase 2, does it make sense as a whole? And one of the things that's going to come out of this adaptability, responsiveness, and thinking about multiple purposes is don't put a business case together where delivering only half of it doesn't deliver you enough of the benefits to make it worthwhile. So we will need to rethink about how we design some of these schemes so that we do give the option to future governments or future politicians
to take different paths. Right, okay. And so it's not just a case of one business case, that's the business case we stick to. It's a case of here are the multiple business cases, and as you get to the different decision points, you can choose to do that or the next thing. It's very agile.
It is, and it's very sort of, if you think about program management thinking, so MSP with your tranches, that's exactly what they are for.
Yeah, right.
So the purpose of a tranche is that you could stop at that point, and you've delivered a new capability that's able to deliver the outcomes and the benefits that you seek. So it's not, from a practitioner perspective, assuming we've got mostly a lot of practitioners on the call or in Auckland today, then they're the techniques that we would be using. Now, to explain that to policymakers and the funders, that actually what you're going to be doing is committing to this tranche, and there's the option that we would stand it down and go no further, but actually then it's a separate investment to do the second and the third tranches, or we can pivot depending upon where we've got to.
Okay. So these are massive projects. I mean, I know in New Zealand we've got a number of very large projects going on. There's a replacement of waterways across all councils, which is needing to be funded centrally, or at least someone's got to find out where that money's coming from. And I think taking a national perspective is probably the direction people are going to head in. And then there's also the modifications, a transformation of the DHBs. So we had a whole lot of DHBs, and they're going to be reorganised around a new structure, which is touching on healthcare, which after COVID, of course, is a very delicate thing to do. And these are major, probably not as expensive as what some of these projects you're talking about are doing, but they are highly politicised, and they are highly. Obviously New Zealanders are very cautious about modifying. It's a bit like modifying the NHS, right? You don't touch the NHS if you can. And so when you think of large projects, are you thinking purely from monetary point of view, or do you take into account highly politicised, highly risky? When you're describing a large project or a major project, is major financial or is major delicateness political? How do you
I think it's more about impact than cost. There will be some major projects just because of the material involved, or the tin and the concrete or whatever that will become expensive, and that's a characteristic in itself. But they don't always necessarily need to be really expensive. And transformation projects or programs are likely to have a lower headline cost, but in terms of the number of citizens impacted, could be greater. So I think the major project is best described more in the impact than in the headline budget.
Okay.
And there's, I mean, I worked at Transport for London for 4 years, where we were trying to understand what was driving complexity, and it was in response to when it was formed. There was a requirement to give it dispensation to have more autonomy from the Department for Transport, because it's a constitutional thing. So it's incorporated as a local authority, transport board,
Right. Okay.
but it was receiving funding from a department. So it's a bit of an anomaly in how it was constituted in that respect. But it was required to put in a risk-based assurance approach. So therefore, if you're going to only turn over the stones of those that you think you're going to find something underneath, you need to understand what's driver for risk.
Right.
And the headline that had always been used is the expected final cost, the EFC, was what drove the assurers to say we're going to turn over those stones because it's got the biggest budget associated to it. And whilst the budget generally implies that there's more parts, coming back to one of those 4 things, and there's more organisations involved and more people and longer duration, but not always, then generally following the money isn't a bad, it's not a bad approach.
One, isn't it?
It's one.
Yep.
But what you don't then find are those really risky ones that have a low budget, a big impact, and so therefore it wasn't really triggering the need for greater scrutiny or more assurance. So that risk-based approach was far more critical, which comes back to the complexity cliff, which we put on as a teaser for this. So the idea of the complexity cliff is that as your capability goes up, your ability to deliver more complex things goes up. So the fitter you are, the further you can run, if you want to put it into sort of a running analogy, or or if you're
it's like a ratchet mechanism.
Yes, yeah.
The more capable you are, the more risky things you do,
and if you're not capable of doing it, it's not a case of let's say you've only got, I don't want to do it in percentage terms, but it's easy. But let's say you're 90% capable. It doesn't mean to say you'll only deliver 90% of the outcome. So there's the cliff. So the moment you're not capable, the performance drops off significantly.
Right. Okay.
So an organisation understanding, of its major projects, which are those ones that's within its ability to deliver. What you'll soon see is you'll have some types of projects, not necessarily the one with the biggest budget, but it could be new technology or new ways of working, that all of a sudden they're the ones that are persistently failing. And that means that in that type of project, you've hit your complexity cliff. You're the wrong side of your capability line. So what you can do is to try and make them less complex by reducing the scope, reducing the number of parts, reducing the number of organisations, all those things that would make them less complex. Or you can make yourself fitter.
You're right, upscale
raise that capability. So it's really important for organisations to try and get a grip of what their capability is and what the complexity of their projects are, not necessarily in that sort of financial monetary terms, which is why something like P3M3 is ideal, because it's an objective measure of how capable you are as an organisation of delivering projects.
And I guess for major projects, you could probably do P3M3 assessments just on the project itself, since they're large enough, right?
They are, yeah. So, or you do it, we end up doing a multiple maturity assessment. So one of the things that we have in the UK is something called the Project Initiation Route Map, or it's now just called Route Map. The Infrastructure and Projects Authority developed it, and what it says is you need to understand the capabilities of those organisations involved, not just the organisation involved. So that would be what we categorise as the sponsor organisation. So that would typically be, say, a government department that's securing the funds and justifying the investment that's going to be made for the project. It would typically be the client organisation, if you like, the owner-operator of the capability that's being delivered. So that, let's say the Department for Transport, then it would be, say, National Highways as the client,
right?
Because that's the organisation that's going to run whatever's going to be delivered. And then you've got industry, who are going to be, providing solutions for the client organisation. You've got advisors, you've got assurers.
Right.
So actually all of those need to be fit. So you need to understand the collective capability. And that collective capability is how familiar they are with each other. Have they worked with each other before?
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Some basic questions, really. Yeah.
Basic questions, and also disciplines as well. So if you've got, civils working with, technology disciplines, and they've got a history of, working together and understanding each other's disciplines, that's fine. But if you've got a new discipline that's not worked with those other disciplines before, then that creates complexity as well.
Okay. So there's that. So when you talk about this route map, is this a route map to work out the complexities between these different stakeholders and participants? Or?
Yeah. So it's a relatively simple capability and complexity assessment that just runs through some diagnostics based upon the characteristics of those different types of organisations. So it's classified in terms of, what would a performing organisation look like. So it's more performance oriented than capability oriented. But so it's a useful test to say, where are you, and also where are the perhaps compatibility issues, because you can have a very mature client and an immature supply chain because it's new, novel areas of work or an emerging market. Then you've got a capability clash going on there. Or likewise, you have a really mature supply chain and an immature client. Then you're going to have issues working there as well. So getting that compatibility between the organisations is also a useful thing to do.
I wonder if that's been, is that adopted then as part of the procurement process? Because
no, so it's there. You do that sort of early market testing or early market engagement. And the route map in itself is effectively pre-investment decision. So it's a diagnostic for getting to yes, rather than something you do once you're going. So it's about knowing the nature of what we need.
So like a generic representation of who you might engage with rather than specific individuals.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So you might do it by if we're going to be doing some tunnelling, what's the maturity of the tunnelling market at the moment,
right. Okay.
and what's their performance, what's their track record, and what's their capacity.
Okay.
So you wouldn't necessarily do it on supplier A.
No,
that's procurement. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Okay, cool. Well, that sounds like something we should definitely do another talk about. Now, it looks like we're going to be wrapping up soon. So before I do, though, just want to let you guys know what all this is all about. So these breakfast events, they're based around our lessons library. We've interviewed project and program experts and project managers to create the world's largest depository of project lessons. We're capturing all those lessons so you don't have to. Our library is available for you to use within your organisation. Oral and visual storytelling, I reckon, is the best way to establish a common understanding and a culture within the organisation, right? So we're going to have Patrick on at another time. So here we've got some technical issues here. So with a bit like Patrick will be on either next month or an event coming to you live in the future. Now, recordings of this live stream is going to be made available to you along with the request to provide us with feedback about the event. Feel free to share the link with others. Our next event is tomorrow morning, where Andy, this guy, will be talking about using data to improve major projects, and Sarah Walsh will be joining us talking about effective communication, which is crucial for the success of any project. And in June, we're going to have Rob England telling us about beyond business agility and open IT beyond agile. So I'm sure there's going to be quite a few people I know in Wellington interested. So thanks for coming. We look forward to seeing you at a future event. Ka te whanau. Thank you. Thank you, whanau. See you.